Next, I want to go over a headlock. And right from the get-go, I want to say, or I want to argue, that a headlock should be conceptualized mostly as an arm throw. And most people, as they're learning the headlock, have a tendency to focus a lot on grabbing and manipulating the head, and that's really not what's important. What's important is controlling this arm here. Okay, this is what's important, the arm, whether I have it inside control or outside control here. And I want you to think about that as we're going through these techniques, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, and as I'm demonstrating this, hopefully it'll make sense. But right from the get-go, conceptualize the headlock, not so much as grabbing the head, but securing the arm. The arm that goes on the head is just going to be guiding the head, and the more you clamp onto the head, typically, the more difficulty you're going to have learning this type of a technique. Now, I can get the headlock from a couple different positions. Two of the positions I like the most are either outside or inside. So I can have an inside control here when I'm controlling the arm, or I can have outside control here. Naturally, this situation, for example, the last throw we had, the basic hip toss, if I have an underhook here, I'm set up for that. But if as we're pummeling, Colby gets underneath, notice I don't have an underhook on this side, so I can't do that last throw we did, the basic hip toss. And so that will be a situation where instead of trying to come under to throw, what I'd be doing is I'd be coming on top to throw. Okay? So I want you to think a little bit about that in terms of the positions that will be favorable for you to attack. Sometimes your arm is going to be low, and it can go here, or here for an arm throw. Sometimes, because he's beat me on the underhook side, I've got to come over top. Okay, so I just want you to be thinking about that as we're going through this next series of throws, headlocks and arm throws in particular, and the situations where the basic hip toss, the headlock, and the arm throw may come in or may not be available. Now, inside grip or outside grip on the arm, typically I can get this position from pummeling in here, and if he beats me on one side, to come here to throw, that will be one situation. So from the pummel, and most of these throws, these backstep throws, pretty much you can get from a pummel situation. Again, depending upon whether you've got the underhook or been beat trying to get the underhook or stave off your opponent's underhook, makes a big difference in terms of what type of throw you're going to initiate. Also, headlock can be gotten not from this very closest of ranges where we're tied up here in a pummeling or clinch type situation, but if I'm working up in here and Colby is pushing into me, at that point too, notice we have a little bit more distance here than we had here a moment ago, but there's a favorable position for attack here, okay, to come through from that direction. So you can have a little bit of choice in your distance. It can be locked up fairly tight, or you can be more inside control, loose collar tie, and that's a position where you can get this type of an attack. Again, typically, I want my opponent pushing into me, or I want to manipulate him to push into me. Trying to throw any kind of backstepping throw when my opponent's backing up is very difficult, if not impossible. So I want to get him to push into me. I can do that frequently by giving him a little bit of a shove, or if I notice he's pushing into me, I push back and resist a little bit. He's going to push back harder, okay, or maybe he's just plain beating me in like a pushing match here, and that gives me the opportunity to come with whatever type of throw I want. So I typically want my opponent pushing in one way or the other, either because he's doing it in his initiation of an attack or improving his position, or because I've manipulated him to push into me. The other thing is I want him to, again, circle towards the side that I'm going to come through on with my hip. I don't want him to be coming this way if I'm going to try a headlock in this direction, because I've got to catch up with him, and that's very, very difficult. Okay, now, for the main part of the technique with the headlock, with those ideas in mind. You'll notice, as I go through with this, watch this hand up here. I'm going to step. I'm going to lower my hip from here. Now, this hand here is not going to try to jam his head. I'm not going to try to hold his head tight to my body. what I'm doing here is I'm pulling with my grip, and this arm with the bicep is guiding the back of his head. Now, that being said, I want you to look a little bit at this grip. From here, I'm not below the crook of his elbow. I'm going to be on his bicep. And as I come through, I want you to notice with this grip, as I step through slowly, and I'm in here, notice as I lock this elbow to my body, there's tremendous friction because there's a lot of contact with my arm on Colby's arm here. So I really have this arm very tight, and this arm here is just guiding his head through. I'm not so concerned about grabbing here. And that's very, very important, because if I miss the head, from here, if I miss the head, it's no great shakes. Typically, you'll still have your opponent go. You still throw your opponent if you have the arm tight. Again, the grip, when I'm outside, is going to be palm on his bicep, which is above the crook of his elbow. It's not here high, but kind of corkscrewed around, because when I step, again, watch this elbow here. When I step through, and this is going to be the same thing, by the way, when we do an arm throw, but when I step through, I want you to watch all the contact with his body and arm that I have here, so that I have this very tight here. From here, this is tight. If I pull this elbow in, down, his arm is very well secured to my body. And that's really where I'm getting the upper body portion of the throw from. Not this up here by holding his head or trying to pull his head through with my right arm. That's not where it's coming from. It's mostly securing his arm. The head is going to be manipulated as I pop it with my bicep, and that's simply going to get him to come over more, and I'm going to come over and I'm going to drive down. And that's going to help when I pop my hips. His head's going to be coming up and down, and when I pop my hip, or his hip, he's going to go. Okay, head down, his hip up. Another thing on pretty much all of these throws is the direction you're looking in. Again, whether this is a headlock, an arm throw, or the hip toss. But as I come through here and I pop, I want my head looking that way. So at first, my visual attention, of course, is going to be directed towards Colby's upper body here. And when I step and I come through, I don't want to keep looking over here. I want to be turning my head, looking in that direction. And that's going to help torque my body, which is also going to help with throw. So that's kind of a crucial aspect to remember. So when I come through and I step, I'm not just trying to go pop and send him directly over me this way. There's also another movement that's involved where I'm going to pop, but I'm also torquing as I'm coming through. In other words, I'm rotating around the axis of my body as well as trying to pop him over. So there's kind of two different things going on there, and you want to be conscious of both. And you can help yourself by, as you step, you're not just going to pop exactly straight forward, you're going to be turning along your upper body's axis as well at the same time. So from here, Now, as I had shown a moment ago, this is the outside control grip. The inside control grip is also on the bicep, but as you'll notice, the outside control bicep grip is on the medial side here on the inside, and the inside grip is on the lateral or outside portion of the bicep. Okay? And when I come through, I'm going to lock this up to my body here. I got to pull it as I'm coming through this way. And I'm going to come through to this. I've got to control this as best I can. I don't have as much friction in this particular position. On the other hand, initially I've got better position because, of course, my control is inside. Also, notice my feet now as I land on the mat. Okay, that's a crucial portion too in terms of being able to secure your partner, your opponent on the mat. So as you do this, make sure you can kind of see, because this one, when I come down, I'm going to pull my foot back, so kind of make sure you can see that. From a pummeling situation, particularly if my opponent ends up beating me with the underhooks. I want to make it naturally. If we're pummeling in here and Colby's digging, I'm not going to make it very easy for him and then try my headlock. I'm going to make it very difficult for him. Why? Because as I make it more difficult, he's really got to dig. Even if I know I'm going to lose that position, I'm still going to make it very difficult, so he has to dig harder. What typically happens? He has more momentum forward at that point, or more force forward, and that helps me continue that when I do my throw. So even though I'm in this situation, and I know I'm getting beat, and I'm thinking about a headlock, I'm not just going to let him slide in here easily and then go for the headlock. I want to make it as difficult as possible, but I'm going to come through very, very quickly. Because otherwise, if he comes through, and I'm not particularly tough as far as making it difficult on him, he's going to get me in a very favorable position to take me to the mat. So, again, you make it very difficult that whole time, even if you know you're losing that position, so that he's got to dig hard, and that's going to give you the opportunity to throw. Colby digs in, and I'm really trying to prevent, but I see he's beating me in this position. I make it very difficult for him. And as he pops through, I throw. As I had mentioned earlier, at least one of my options is to try to pull my opponent sort of into the direction I'm going to throw. So if I'm moving my hips this way, I want to pull him this way so we can kind of meet. And in that way, it'll cut the distance, or at least the time traversing the distance, in half. And one option I have in here is just with a simple collar tie, either from inside control or outside control, as we had talked about. And all I need to do from here now, I'm not going to be tight. I'm going to be fairly loose. I keep this in a position where I can kind of sense Colby's movement to block him off if he tries to attack. And all I'm going to do from here is I'm going to give a good tug this way. Kind of a ballistic tug. I'm not going to kind of like wing him around so much. It's going to be a pretty aggressive and ballistic kind of movement to get his weight here. And then at the same time, I'm going to backstep. So from here, I push in a little bit. I can kind of feel we might be moving around. I'm going to hit, and then I'm going to step through. Again, remember, it's most important that I'm controlling the arm. So this is where the friction and this is where the grip is. The head isn't quite so important in terms of actually locking up per se. I'm going to show a situation where it may be more important, but for now, when I have the arm from either inside or outside control, it's really the arm that is doing the throwing or it's the gripping to allow me to control his upper body, at least to tug on his upper body to get the throw. And why that's important is because if I miss the head, I'm going to keep going with the throw. And more times than not, I'm still going to get the throw. One situation where you are going to be locking down on the head a little bit more. And again, speaking of locking down on the head, when I throw my headlock, again, I want to lift him up so that I'm not doing this, because a lot of people, when they're practicing early on and developing headlocks and basic throws, have a tendency to do that. They grab the head, and if you grab the head, there's a tendency to jam it down towards your hip. And if you do that, if your opponent's head is towards your hip, his hips are not close to your hips enough to execute the throw. So it's crucial when I step through, notice my hip comes to his hip. I'm almost trying to lift this up a little bit here. Here. Okay? So I'm trying to get under to keep his head at the level of my head or even a little higher, so that my hips are going to be in good position to pop them through. Now, one situation where we will lock the head is just a more traditional kind of wrestling situation where we might be both pushing on each other here, and I can lock up here. I'm blocking with my head here, and all I'm going to do is do a throw, and as I do this headlock, I'm going to come through, and I've got to make this circle smaller than his head and his arm so it doesn't peek out. So I've got to make this circle, so I've got to hold this tight as I come through. As I do that, I can't be so tight here now at the initiation of the throw that I can't get my hips in. I've got to begin the throw first, and then I'm going to be sliding my arms and then tightening up that circle.